The leadership crisis in the Gambia. Could its West African neighbours be about to intervene? As President Jammeh clings to power, we hear the story of a fellow soldier who went from being Jammeh's superior officer to having to escape jail and leave the country in fear of his life. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Inside. Welcome to Insight. Power hangs by a thread in the Gambia. To date, President Yahya Jammeh has refused to accept defeat in the election that was held in December last year. He's challenging the decision to make him step down. He's asked the Supreme Court to throw out the result. They could make a decision this week. Gambia's neighbours are concerned. The Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, say they're committed to mediating a peaceful transfer of power. But they haven't ruled out military intervention if it's needed to enforce the handover. Insight's Sarah Firth tells us more.
A unique moment in the Gambia's recent history and a pivotal moment for its future. These were the scenes of joy and hope on the streets when opposition leader Adama Barrow swept to victory. When President Yahya Jammeh conceded defeat on television following the election, after ruling the tiny West African nation for 22 years, it took many people by surprise.
The Gambian people have spoken and have no reason to contest the will of the Almighty Allah. I wish you all the best.
But just 1 week later, and he took to the airwaves to backtrack. Jammeh's party now says it intends to contest the election results in court.
At the moment, a lot of people are a bit concerned about their safety. A lot of them are a bit quiet. Gambia is a very lovely country. People are not that violent like any other, countries that we've seen around the world. So people are waiting to see what the world leaders will do. And I think that would be a kind of an encouragement.
Adama Barrow, though, is backed by a strong opposition coalition. And since the win was announced, has had the backing of powerful regional leaders, with heads of state declaring they'll attend the inauguration of Barrow, who they say must be sworn in on the 19th of January. Well, the opposition in the country have denounced Jammeh's actions as an unconstitutional power grab. And now the international community, including the UN and the African Union, have called on Jammeh to recognise the result and step down. Yahya Jammeh seized power in 1994. In the years that have followed, there's been serious criticisms over his government's human rights record. The Gambia now finds itself in a new situation, partly free from the cycle of fear of the past few decades, but uncertain about what comes next.
What we don't want is people going on the street like they've done in Syria and then finding out that other countries around the world do not back them up. So we don't want that bloodshed. We don't want another Syria in our hands. We don't want another Libya in our hands. And what we want is for good people around the world to come together and make sure that Gambia remains stable.
Jammeh had previously stated he'd rule for 1 billion years if Allah willed it. But it's the will of the Gambian people right now that's making itself felt. The hope that there can be a peaceful transfer of power when Jammeh's term ends, and that the country, once known as the Smiling Coast, can start the long road back from dictatorship towards democracy. Sarah Firth reporting for Insight.
Before the 1994 coup, which saw President Jammeh take power, Brima Chongan was a senior figure in the Gambian army. He was forced to seek exile in Britain when he and a few others decided to stand against the hardline leader. Insight's Sarah Firth went to meet him.
Brima Chongan has been in exile for over 2 decades. A former military leader, he was arrested and spent time in jail for opposing the coup back in 1994.
Well, after Jammeh came to power, I was one of the few officers who resisted them. I kept them on the bridge for a long time, resisted them, opened fire on them. And obviously, I was one of the first people to be kind of arrested and detained. and I've been there, throughout the transition period. So, but people started to see, we had a very vibrant and free press, but he started clamping down on the press, and then clamping down anybody they perceive as a threat.
Can you tell us about the circumstances leading up to you leaving the country?
Well, I was detained throughout the military rule period until they had an election and a new constitution. And by that time, I was one of the last detainees to be released. They had no choice because there was a lot of international pressure. And I have committed no offense. My only offense was defending the democratically elected government on the day of the coup. So I've committed no offense. Okay, they tried to investigate me, see whether I've stolen money or anything, try to get some trumped up charges, and I fought it, and they could have never convicted me, even though the judicial system, as flawed as it was.
What do you remember about your own time in detention?
Well, what I remember from my own detention was the shocking conditions of the prison, and worse than that, on the 6th of September 1994, the whole military junta came there, except Jammeh, from the Vice President, the Minister of Defense, Minister of Interior. They came to the prison, and we went through a mock execution. I went through a mock execution, and they came there, isolated us, and then, went through a mock execution where they fired some weapons and everything, and then isolated us in another wing of the prison called Security Wing Number 1. And the rest of the detainees, they told them that now we have executed 3, tomorrow is your turn. And you can imagine the trauma those people have gone through. At least for us, we have gone through the initial trauma, but the people who are there not knowing when these people are going to come. So that was a very scary and we're just lucky to be alive.
We contacted the Gambian embassy about the allegations, but they didn't respond.
Since Jammeh came to power through a military coup, we have gone from one of the most democratic countries to the least democratic country. When all of Africa was under dictatorship, we had a retrogressive step, and other African countries were moving towards democracy. Jammeh's regime is well documented by the human rights organizations and us in the diaspora, where it's a regime of people who are disappearing, no rule of law, people are detained indefinitely. He has sacked lots of the civil servants, ministers, judges. Basically, he is a king.
What's it been like watching what's happened in the country from afar?
At the beginning, it was very difficult. Over the years, we managed to convince people in the diaspora, and then it also started within the Gambia. And also, Jammeh himself hadn't helped himself, because the more he became repressive, even the people who were with him, supported him, they are the majority of the people who are against him. So this has been long coming.
Well, back some years ago when you had the Arab Spring taking place, there was that sense of protest movement happening in Gambia, and I think a lot of people thought that perhaps then we'd see some changes, but it didn't happen then.
It didn't end up happening, but what has happened is what we've done is unique. We are one of the first countries in Africa to democratically vote out a dictator, because he became arrogant. He thought that people were afraid, and people went and voted massively for the opposition.
Do you think what we're seeing, though, with his refusal now to accept defeat, do you think there is a chance that he'll stay in power?
No, there's no chance. For a couple of reasons. The Gambian people, the fear factor. A dictator, your biggest commodity is the fear factor. The Gambians are not afraid now. They are not afraid anymore. And the international community is on the side of the Gambian people.
What are your hopes for the future of the country?
Well, my hope for the future is to have a democratic Gambia, which is based on rule of law, freedom of expression, so that we can have inward investment into the country, use our diversity as a strength. But we have a lot of healing process to do. I hope, in my view, and that's up for the new administration coming, that we need to set up some form of truth and reconciliation commission, not even to punish people, but to know. Remember, a lot of people have disappeared, they are dead, nobody knows where their bodies are, and their families would want some form of closure. But I think it's doable, and we look forward. Gambians who are in the diaspora, who are in the Gambia, we all work together to have a better Gambia.
This is Insight. Coming up, what next then for Gambia? We discuss if the tiny state's neighbours will intervene.